The next 24 to 48 hours are going to be extremely consequential regarding the US and Israeli-led war on Iran. The situation is now at a stage where this is now or never, because the United States has responded to Iran's proposals, and these proposals have once again been ferried to Tehran by Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi. This is Mr. Naqvi's second visit to Tehran within a week. And there are reports within Pakistan that Pakistan's Chief of Defense Forces, Field Marshal Asim Munir, is also expected to head to Iran in the next few hours or maybe tomorrow. The point of this being that it is now coming on to 90 days since this war started, and it has gone literally nowhere. It is going to be excruciatingly important for these talks to succeed or they will fail. Let's talk about what happens if they succeed. Succeeding in these talks is really going to be predicated on whether the Iranian leadership will accept the position put forward by the United States. And I use the word position because what I'm literally hoping for are some realistic concessions from Washington. Because so far what we have seen coming out of Washington has been ridiculously rigid and has gone back on points that were agreed upon more than 2 months ago. So if the US is going to keep changing the goalposts, then it's really hard to come to any kind of serious, equitable resolution to this conflict. Now, the fact that Pakistani Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi has met with the Commander-in-Chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard of Iran is very significant. He met with General Vahidi, and we don't know what exactly those talks were, but the meeting itself has extremely important consequences, because General Vahidi is also going to be a key person who is going to have to sign off on any decision that Iran reaches, whether they're going to go back to the negotiating table or not. If this time Iran decides that it is not returning to the negotiating table, I truly fear that the next step will be war. A war that is unnecessary and needless. A war that President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu literally blundered into, without planning, without thinking of the consequences, without looking at the potential outcomes. No planning, no war gaming, nothing seems to have been done. President Trump really can't stop with the threats, can he? He issues threats literally morning, day, and night. But we are told that he had a pretty contentious phone call with Netanyahu just a day or so ago, where the call was reported to have set Netanyahu's hair on fire. Well, what exactly does that mean? Israel does not want this war to end. It is in their interest for this war to continue in every which they can. Netanyahu has absolutely, he's on a weak wicket, as we say in cricket. He absolutely has no way to turn around the mess that he has gotten himself and President Trump into. So are they going to persist in dragging themselves further into the quicksand, or are they going to find a way to retreat from this whole situation? Israel's behavior regarding the flotilla that was headed towards Gaza has absolutely raised the stakes for Israel as well. The behavior of Ben-Gvir, no matter how much Netanyahu and Israel's foreign minister try to distance themselves from it, the fact of the matter is that it happened. And the flotilla participants have now been released to their different countries, but they are reporting that they were tortured, they were harassed, and some even have broken bones. What exactly does this mean? In front of cameras, Ben-Gvir films this, releases it from his own account. And can you imagine what they do to Palestinian prisoners in the dungeons and depths of Israeli prisons? It is absolutely shocking the way those flotilla participants were abused by the Israeli forces in international waters. How long is this impunity going to continue? Now, 20 or so European countries and Canada have criticized Ben-Gvir and what happened to these flotilla participants. Where are they when it comes to criticizing the human rights and the rights to life, for God's sake, the most basic right of the Palestinians, of the Lebanese? Israel is waging yet another war in Lebanon, where it is not for safety purposes, it's not to create any kind of buffer zone, it is to acquire land. And we're seeing that every single day. We can't deny the truth when it's right before our eyes in terms of independent reportage. coming out, the very limited reportage, I should say, that is coming out of the region. And Israel has gotten away with a lot of things that they have done in the past, but that was before the era of cell phones and before the onslaught of social media, which is no longer bound by the rules and regulations that are put up by mainstream news channels. So we are really seeing the true face of Israeli repression again, and Israeli brutality against the Palestinians and against the Lebanese. So let's come back to the Iran situation right now. What happens if America decides that Iran's response is not acceptable or Iran rejects the U.S. proposal? Is war the only answer? Let's look at what happens if war is the only answer. The United States has committed to going back to war and fighting harder than ever. Presumably, they'll bear all their military might on to concentrate into this one city that has had the courage to say no to American imperialism. What is Iran going to do? Iran is in a fight for its survival. Iran has taken the pressure for more than 2.5 months and taken an absolute hammering, not just in the past 2.5 months, but last year as well. Both times they have been attacked while they were negotiating. And I find it amusing when people react with a, oh, Iran has been using the ceasefire to rearm and reposition their defenses. Why should that surprise you? Isn't that exactly what the U.S. does? Isn't that exactly what the U.S. does when they attack during negotiations? So when Iran says that they don't trust the United States, this time they're taking measures to make sure that they're not caught off guard. And it's interesting that despite all the threats that have been coming from the United States, Iran consistently maintains that its diplomatic option is as open as its military option. Let's take a listen to what Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi just said yesterday.
ما مأموریت خودمون رو جدای از مأموریت دیگران نمیدانیم. هر جا لازم باشه بجنگیم میجنگیم، هر جا لازم باشه مذاکره کنیم مذاکره میکنیم. مأموریتی هست که نظام به هر یک از ما داده، ما هم مأموریتمون در این مسیر هست. کاملا هم در هماهنگی با مجموعه نظام، مجموعه اهداف نظام. اگر لازم باشه منافع نظام اقتضا بکنه که در میدان دیپلماسی، در میدان گفتگو، در میدان مذاکره حاضر بشیم، حاضر خواهیم شد با قوت، به همون قوتی که نیروهای مسلح در عرصه دفاع از کشور حاضر میشه.
So that was Abbas Araghchi talking about Iran being prepared both for diplomacy as well as for a military response. Does Trump really want to let this war escalate? The whole world is suffering. It's not just the United States who is facing high prices and higher gasoline prices. It's Pakistan, it's India, it's Sri Lanka, it is Southeast Asia. Everybody is suffering. And nobody is going to suffer more than if Iran responds by attacking what it has said are its enemies. And that clearly includes the United Arab Emirates. And Iran has been somewhat considerate of not bombing key civilian installations. We're going to take a look at that and the debate over what is a valid target and what is not. So Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian made a statement saying that the enemy, referring to the United States and Israel, has targeted schools. We know that, Minaf. The U.S. continues to flip-flop around it, and the shameful hearing that General Bradley Cooper presented in the United States, I think the whole world was as disgusted as the U.S. senators that were listening to that, saying, we don't believe you. The Minaf School, a maternity hospital. We saw the visuals of a nurse desperately, frantically grabbing babies from incubators and rushing them out as the hospital, the nearabouts of the hospital were being bombed. And schools and civilian sites have been bombed in Iran. What has Iran done in response? They've predominantly targeted military sites. It's interesting that now the UAE, amongst other countries, is saying that Iran's targeting was not so targeted and accurate. Well, I'd like to remind everybody that, you know, that hotel that was bombed in Dubai, the Fairmont, well, at that time, the UAE said that that was just hit by debris from an interceptor or a missile from Iran that was intercepted. And other locations that were hit, that were civilian areas, were reported at that time to be debris from interceptors or from Iranian missiles. Today, you can't turn around and say that those were Iranian deliberate targets, because Either that was true then or this is true now. At that time, you wanted to protect your tourism industry and say Dubai is completely safe. Today, you want to say that Iran is the aggressor attacking civilian targets. Doesn't wash, doesn't go both ways, guys. It is absolutely fascinating how the war of narratives has been as aggressive and as strong as actual military war itself. And there are a couple of things here that I think we really, really need to focus in on. Threats, promises of violent retribution, erasing civilizations to the ground, destroying water salination plants or what have you. This happens. It's part of war. It's called propaganda. What really matters is what is discussed at the negotiation table. What rules come into play at the negotiating table. We talk about justice of war. Is the war that we're going into, is it justified? Is there a reason to conduct and prosecute this war? I think in terms of the war on Iran, I think we can all agree that there was absolutely no reason for this war. Once you're in a war, you're supposed to prosecute that war with justice. You're supposed to follow international rules. You're supposed to avoid civilian targets. Yet we have President Trump threatening civilian targets. Everybody says it's a war crime, but nobody wants to do anything about it. There's a third element that we were never taught in college. We just got justice of war, justice in war. But let's talk about who's prosecuting this war. Benjamin Netanyahu, wanted for corruption and is literally avoiding his trial by continuing with this war. He should be in court right now. He should be being prosecuted for the corruption trial that he is facing. He's facing elections coming up in August. Is he going to win? I don't know. That depends on the Israeli people. And he is wanted by the International Criminal Court of Justice. He is being accused of being a war criminal. And let's look at President Trump, a convicted felon, a man who has more accusations against him that would have sunk any other political leader anywhere else in the world. These are the credentials of the two men who are leading a war that could potentially destroy the global economy, throw us into a global recession where God knows how we would recover, and potentially kill thousands of people, their own as well as Iranians. The UAE hasn't specified what they would do in retaliation, but it is generally understood that they would attack, perhaps this time, desalination plants, which are a lifeline for Gulf countries. And let me tell you about a little anecdote when I was living and working in Dubai in the 90s. And at that time, there was an oil spill, and ironically, it was an illegal Iranian tanker dodging the sanctions that were bringing oil into some of the UAE ports at that time. And bad weather would sometimes cause these barges to tip over. And at one time, a barge tipped over after stormy weather near Sharjah, which is also in the UAE. And that oil entered the intake pipes of the desalination system of Sharjah. More than half the city was without water. Oil had flooded into the pipes, into the water supply, and it took them several days to clean it out. That was just one emirate, and they were able to get water from Ajman and Ras Al Khaimah and Dubai to be able to compensate for what was happening over there. Today, if desalination plants, even one or two, are taken out, it will be a crisis. Does Iran have the right to do that? No, they don't have the right in terms of that is a civilian infrastructure, and that is considered to be off limits. But Iran would be well within their rights at this point to say the order, the rule of law has been thrown out by the United States and Israel. They can absolutely, if they are faced with their absolute destruction or annihilation, then they will do anything to survive. I would. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't everybody? So it is absolutely horrifying for me that thousands of people have died. Literally, thousands of people have died in Iran and in Lebanon. But we're not looking at that. What are we looking at? The Strait of Hormuz. When will oil start flowing again? Oil flows count more than the flow of human blood. I guess I'm naive to think that human life matters. No, it's the economies that matter. Well, in another sense, it's not just oil that is stuck at the Strait of Hormuz, is it? It's fertilizer, It's chemicals. It's so much other stuff that makes the world go round, medicines and what have you. The United Nations has warned that there could be a global food shortage if planting seasons are delayed any further. It is an absolutely impossible situation. President Trump is not facing, he says he doesn't have to worry about anything. He's not worried about timelines. President Trump, you should be worried about timelines. Farmers need to grow their crops. They need to feed the world. They need their lives to continue. People need to move around and do their work. I mean, just how is this irrational war serving American interests or the interests of the world? They're clearly not. And China, whom you visited, President Trump, and China basically said to you, and then right after that, Russian President Putin arrived there. And they put out a statement talking about a multipolar world. President Trump, you have upended the world order. What is happening right now, 2026, is as consequential as the fall of the Berlin Wall. It has turned the world around on its head. New power centers are going to emerge. The world is at a point where nobody trusts the one unit power that existed, and that was the United States. NATO is in tatters. President Trump, you have shredded your alliances, and people don't trust you. It's not just Iran. How do you think the Gulf Arab countries feel right now? They feel abandoned. They feel that they were dragged into a war that they didn't want. Life was perfect for them. But now they're going to pay the price. And those bases that you had all across the Gulf countries, they're gone. And they didn't really help much, did they? So who is going to rely on the United States? Taiwan? Taiwan is extremely nervous after China gave President Trump a rap over the knuckles and said, you're not sending more arms to Taiwan. And Trump literally waffled. What? Age-old alliances mean nothing? Then why would new alliances mean anything? It's time for America to take a good look at itself, and we're told that more than 60% of Americans are against the war in Iran. Well, we sitting here in other countries don't see that, do we? We just see the comments on social media which say, finish them once and for all. Go out and obliterate them. Blow them away. What has this war been for? I don't think you know yourself, President Trump. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu certainly knows. And guess what? He wasn't on your side.